to start by responding to some of my opponent's claims. She first mentioned that tenure is a protection from political attacks and unfair dismissal, and it may have started out that way, but it is a very old system, and now we have other things in place that will prevent unfair dismissal. An online philosophical forum discussing the advantages and disadvantages of tenure said that tenure helps prevent teachers from being laid off for either political or personal reasons. Since tenure predates most of the modern employment fairness laws, it makes sense that tenure was created to help protect teachers. However, since these laws now exist, they make this reason for supporting tenure redundant and obsolete. All the modern employment laws do apply to teachers. They also mentioned that tenure is not easy to obtain, and in reality, it sort of is. All you have to do is work and be effective, which really isn't a clear marker of how well a teacher is doing in the classroom. You can be completely mediocre and half your class understanding what you're trying to say and be labeled effective, especially if the administration is not doing accurate evaluations and things like that, because they're not into the system. They're not promoting academic growth, because tenure promotes such a stagnant and mediocre environment for our students. And tenure does protect bad teachers. It greatly slows down the removal process for these teachers, and in some cases makes it so difficult to fire them that all they do is just push them into another corner or to another sector of the district rather than actually firing them, which hurts some students while it improves the class experience for others. Jeffrey Canada writes that teachers need to know that they will not be fired arbitrarily, but the current tenure system in many schools has gone too far. A system that favors seniority and ignores merit sends a terrible signal to anyone thinking about teaching. They also mentioned the Oregon model, saying, do we really know that it will work? It has worked in Oregon. It also works in Toledo. The Toledo Federation of Teachers has worked with district administrators to negotiate a nationally recognized system for teacher evaluation, intervention, and dismissal based on a peer assistance and review model. The program, which started in 1981, addresses the performance of both new teachers and veterans. It involves both evaluation and intervention. It also works in international nations, which I'll return to in a moment. Now, to expand on my partner's claims a little bit and just making our case, the educational system in the U.S. needs an overhaul, and that starts with tenure. Tenure is a major contributor to the stagnation and inability of our system to meet changing demands. Tenure is not only bad for the students, but it's also bad for the teachers. In comparison with other first world nations, our teachers actually make less than other countries where they don't have tenure, because we're holding that tenure in front of them like a carrot on a stick, saying, well, if you work harder, we'll give you tenure, and that's sort of a guarantee of a position in a school. And so that gives us we feel that gives us a right to pay them less. In comparison with other nations, our teachers only make 96% of the country's gross domestic product per capita, whereas other nations, including Japan, they make about 117%. So in comparison to what the country is making overall, they're making more money. Also, Japan, in comparison to the number of teaching hours, our teachers are working almost twice as much as another teacher. It's an average of 635 teaching hours in Japan, but 1,139 hours in the United States. So we're paying them less, making them work more hours, and just holding that tenure in front of them, trying to get them to do better work. But that's a system that's going to promote mediocrity, because if we're pushing them hard and just holding this thing in front of them that not everyone can get tenure, how do we expect a quality product from them? It's just a system that's not going to work in the long run. Naomi Riley, writing for thechronicle.com, writes, Stephen Pothero, professor of religion at Boston University, says it would be so much different if there were a free and open labor market. People wouldn't be stuck for life in all kinds of cities they don't want to live in. One reason that middle-aged people in academia have such a difficult time getting jobs is that there are almost no job openings due to tenure, let alone senior job openings. People get tenure and then they get stuck. We live in a world where people are constantly changing jobs and wanting to move around. What if they meet someone online that's across the nation and they can't because they're going to give up their tenure position? People get stuck, and that's really not a system we want to encourage when we have a global mindset going on these days. I'd also like to talk about how tenure in our current system is causing problems for our students. Alexander Schwab writes that perhaps the most tragic is the disproportionate harm inflicted upon the children of the least privileged. Parents active in their local schools will lobby for the removal of incompetent teachers from their children's classrooms, but because tenure presents an insurmountable obstacle to dismissal, administrators move these teachers rather than fire them. Eventually, they gravitate to schools in low-income areas, often populated by immigrant families, where parents are less likely to be vocal about their dissatisfaction with teachers. So those most in need of a quality education become those least likely to receive it. And tenure is what's promoting this, because we can't get rid of those teachers that we really need to get rid of. As far as money, in accounting terms, hiring someone on a 5-year contract at $80,000 is much less expensive than hiring them on a 40-year contract at $65,000. One is a liability of perhaps $350,000 and the other millions. So this was Megan McCardle for the article, How Much Does Tenure Cost for the Atlantic newspaper? This is just describing how when we sign up for a long-term commitment like this, we really don't know what we're getting into. And overall, it's not a good idea. It's not something you would do with any other aspect of your life. So why would you want to commit to a teacher that you don't know is going to be the right one for your children in the long term? Tenure also prevents the system from renewing their skill set. In the same way, tenure can slow a school district's response time to significant changes in technology and society. As new areas of study are created and others become obsolete, tenure leaves schools powerless to shift resources quickly or force teachers to learn new disciplines. This lag time handicaps school system educators who can cope with changing demands on the curriculum. I myself suffered through an entire semester typing for children and learning how to save things onto floppy disks that were already outdated in high school because the teacher didn't know how to use CDs. It was a complete waste of time and a complete waste of our resources. I'd like to finish up by revisiting the idea that a different renewable contract system does work. Simon Batterbury of the North American Education Society writes that yet the system of temporary and permanent contracts enjoyed in most European countries, in Australasia and elsewhere, provides flexibility for employees, not just employers, and it does not create a marginal class of untenured and non-tenured track second-class citizens. It does not have quite the same detrimental impact on livelihoods and morale that a tenure system does.